boredom of normalcy and the numbness of mediocrity stiffens your passions. What that meant was, I was so sick of myself. I was so bored in my life, man. I was so tired of being mediocre. I was just tired of it, and it was all my fault. I was mediocre because I wasn't doing the things to be exceptional. You ever say to yourself, man, it's gotta be more to my life than this? If you've ever said that, that's cause it is. And you gotta get after that, man. You gotta go and get at that. If you don't do it, life becomes real normal and real mediocre to you. Now, there's nothing wrong with being normal, but if normal is getting on your nerves, then you got to change something. Being mediocre was driving me crazy. And it started when I was homeless, man. It just pushed me. Because I was sick of being poor. I'm gonna just be honest with you. Poverty, I was sick of it. I was up to here. I'd had enough. And homeless is a whole nother level of poverty. Not having a bathroom, a bedroom, a back door, a TV, a phone. You know, I was homeless in the 80s, man. There wasn't even no cell phones then. So I ain't got no phone, I ain't got no backyard. I ain't trying to be preachy or nothing, but that pushed me towards my faith.
It's so easy to be great nowadays, my friend, because most people are weak. Most people don't want to go to that extra mile. Most people don't want to find that extra because it sucks. It's miserable, it's lonely. You talk about that you were kind of, lonely by yourself. I was the same way. And that used to hurt me growing up. That's the only place to be.
Life is a war. And there are people out there and there are things out there that are trying to take you down. Things are gonna go wrong. And when things go wrong, it's pretty easy just to say, you know what, I'm gonna stand down or I'm gonna give up. And you can do that. But I think no. I think keep fighting. And you keep fighting, and you keep fighting, and you keep fighting no matter what. And you never quit. You never quit. And if you feel like your life is in a place where you can't get any lower, and you don't think you can find any way out, good. Because that means the ultimate challenge is ahead of you. It means you can only go up. And it also means that things are gonna be tough. Things are gonna be tougher than anything you can imagine. But that storm that you're in, from your perspective, it seems like that storm is enveloping the whole world. But I'm telling you, it is not. The storm that you're in, it is hard to see out of that storm. It's hard to see past it. It seems like the storm is everything. But the storm is not everything. But right now,
if you have the ability to love yourself first. Charles Bukowski. So last week I was in Utah, and while I was there I did some guided breath work, which I'd never done before, and honestly was a little skeptical at first. But I try and keep an open mind and gave it a shot. I'm happy I did. It ended up potentially being one of the most important things I've ever done. And I want to share why. Because this breakthrough or aha moment, if you will, was exactly what I needed when I needed to hear it. So this episode's going to be a little different than usual, but I feel compelled to pass it along. So to set the scene, I arrived with a friend of mine to the instructor Jen's location. She gave us an overview, kind of explaining what the next hour is going to look like, and handed me a notebook to write down my goal for the session. And the notebook becomes pretty important as the story goes on. But I opened it, And I wrote what I'd like to use this session to reflect on. It happened to be the walls that I have a tendency to build around myself, right? That day, that felt like the most pertinent obstacle in my life. I saw it as an opportunity to push back against that reality that human beings love to create normal and then latch onto it. And that's not ideal, because when we do that, we stop looking for places to grow, we stop pushing, we stop seeking to live life to the fullest. In other words, we settle. And so I wrote that down. I closed the notebook, laid back on this incredible fuzzy blanket, and the music got turned on. We began the breathing pattern. In, out. In, out. Jen started guiding us, verbally taking us back to a conversation with our younger selves. The journey had begun. And this is the part where things get really interesting, because my thoughts really did feel like some strange mix of dreaming and hallucinating, just from breath work. But at some point, she referenced the need to let go and said the words, we weren't meant to suffer or hold on to suffering. And that really cut deep, because I know there are so many places where I've rationalized continuous suffering in my life. I'd speculate that in some way, we all do. When the hard thing or the uncomfortable thing, when they stop being stepping stones and instead just become the way things are, becomes a concession. Hey, this doesn't feel good, but it's my life. This person holds me down, but it's how things are. I don't like doing this every day. It eats at me, but hey, life, am I right? That's learned helplessness. It hides in the corners and the nooks and crannies of life, subtle enough that we don't give it much thought. And I imagined very vividly climbing down a ladder placed on the edge of this dark canyon that went straight down. Down, down, down. Everything, my entire landscape was black and white. There was zero color, except for the rays of light barely visible at the bottom. All the way down as I descended into the canyon. The colors, they'd get a little stronger, a little brighter, as if every step put a little more vibrance into my life. Each move down made things a little clearer, the ladder becoming quicker and quicker, eventually turning into a slide that brought me down to the base of the canyon, where upon landing and standing up, everything was illuminated. Fields of sunflowers, waterfalls, birds chirping, the sun shining, and it was there in that moment I realized my intention for the class, the one I wrote down in that little notebook, well, it missed the mark. Not in the sense of being incorrect or wrong necessarily, but it simply wasn't enough. See, at the root of it all, or at the bottom of that canyon, existed life with the courage to love yourself. Not just accept yourself, not just be okay with your existence, but love yourself. With all your faults and your struggle, with all your mistakes and your history, it became clear to me how much changes when you love with all your heart the person staring back at you in the mirror. The opinions of others, they do not guide your decision-making. How could they? How could others know you better than you? In fact, those opinions are part of the black and white landscape to be left behind at the top of the mountain. The consistent suffering you've become accustomed to, the learned helplessness you endure, That's not acceptable to someone who truly loves him or herself. Loving yourself means pushing away that which is not you. It's finding that ladder down to the beautiful world of authenticity and truth, the magic of being aligned with what really matters. And what's funny is, I can talk about breaking down barriers. They should be broken down. I can talk about stepping into fear because it should be confronted. I can talk about finding a way out when we're stuck and a way up when we're down. I can talk about all of that every day of my life. But none of it matters if you don't learn to fully love the reflection in the mirror more than you ever thought you could. Think about the gift you could give to that younger version of yourself. Think about what you could give to those close to you, your family, your friends. Think about what you could do for the world if you left those black and white concessions behind you and lived a life true to yourself. It is, of course, not always easy, but I learned that day that it is the North Star. It's what we build upon. So before we ask how to shape the world around us, maybe we should be asking, how do we embrace the one within us? Maybe we should learn to love ourselves so deeply that those walls don't need to be broken down. Because in time, we'll learn not to build them up in the first place. We'll learn that in a world of black and white, it is acceptance and trust and confidence and love that gives it color. There's a quote attributed to H. Jackson Brown Jr. He says, "Nothing is more expensive than a missed opportunity." I tend to agree with this. I also think it's interesting that these missed opportunities are also the most difficult, if not impossible, to quantify. Right, so if you think about our common understanding of progress or growth, it's a sacrifice, right? It's doing X brings us Y. Doing the work gets the result. It's a simple formula, and you can show your proof. You can work backwards, right? I started working out 1 hour a day 6 months ago. This is what I look like now. The cost was 1 hour a day. The result, well, this is what I look like now. But what's the inverse of that thinking? What's the cost of not doing the work or starting the journey or taking the steps? See, we don't think about that. We don't think about the opportunity cost. Our instinct is not to question the actions we don't take. I was listening to an old lecture from Jim Rohn, who I love because he's such a practical thinker. He's got ideas you can literally, plug right into your life. And he had an amazing point. He was talking about a conversation with an old friend in which he asks his friend, who apparently watches a lot of TV, he says, "Hey, what does that TV cost?" His friend says, "Well, I think it's like $500. Jim says, "No, I don't think so." His friend says, "Yeah, I bought it, $500. He says, "No, I think it's costing you about $40K a year." Why? Well, not because of what he paid for the item, but because of the opportunity cost. What his time using that TV could be reallocated to. That's what's so incredible about that point. It's like, just because you don't have something doesn't mean you aren't in fact losing out on it. Time is our most precious of commodities. Its utilization is the gateway to transformation. It should be protected. And, the intent of the message is not to walk around panicking about every second, of every minute, but more being aware, holistically, how recklessly we use our time. I don't know if you've ever looked at the screen time usage on a cell phone before going to bed at night. It's terrifying. Right? Some of it was necessary, but a lot of it wasn't. And what does that cost? What does 2 hours a day of not moving towards a dream or goal cost you? What about when it accumulates and it becomes 14 hours a week, or roughly 56 hours a month, or times 12, 672 hours a year? These numbers start to get eye-opening. Right? All it takes is a little awareness, and we see how often we dispose of time like it's valueless. Everything we do has a cost, because in doing it, we are making a decision to not be doing something else with that time. And again, I believe in balance. I want to emphasize that. I'm not suggesting that we walk around like robots, clocking in, clocking out, checking boxes so that we don't ever waste a minute, right? As the great Keith Urban says, the best days of my life were all that wasted time. We should explore and enjoy and love and laugh and experience life. But that awareness makes us more intentional with those pursuits. With our work time and our play time, it forces us in a way to prioritize, to ask ourselves what we want. Instead of only looking at progress like this vending machine where you put an X and Y comes out. Well, we can ask ourselves, what happens if I don't put an X? What happens if I keep it in my pocket? What won't come out? What could have existed that now won't? See, just because you don't see something slipping away, that doesn't mean that it isn't. And the immediate, the world in front of you, unfortunately, won't remind you of that. That's a bell you have to ring yourself. You have to peel back the what am I doing and unveil the what could I be doing? What could I be creating? What could reality look like? And maybe you think about it and you find that you're right where you want to be. And that's great. Maybe you realize you've accepted a tolerable existence at the expense of an ideal existence. In which case, I also have great news. You can change that, and you can change it now. We have to understand that you don't only have what's in front of you, you also possess a reality unseen and undiscovered. So don't let the former cover up or diminish the latter. Don't lose the possibility of tomorrow with the distractions of today. Don't forget the cost of inaction with regard to those things that truly matter. Just go. Sure, things will feel strange at first, abstract at first, wrong at first. It's incredibly difficult to separate from the past. It's hard to detach from the deeply rooted biological whispering of, hey, at least you knew what to expect back there. But that whispering has preservation in mind, not happiness. And at some point, we need to stop preserving that which is not ideal, so go. The walls that once existed, they'll crumble. And this will be startling at first, shocking at first, intimidating at first. It's incredibly difficult to watch foundational structures crumble around us, especially when you know you are the one that lit the fuse. It's hard to walk away from the faint murmur stating, hey, this was your home, how dare you leave it? But those words, they have status quo in mind, not growth. And home is an idea you take with you. It's no set of parameters. just go. The stories you told yourself, the narratives you thought were forever will prove to be nothing more than the end of an underwhelming chapter. This will feel abrupt at first, unfair at first, will leave you deeply unsatisfied at first. It's incredibly difficult to realize that happily ever afters aren't linear, they're cyclical. It's hard to walk away from the voices pleading with you not to turn the page, stating that because their realities will remain the same, so must yours. But those aren't the characters with whom you'll emerge victorious. Some movies must be recast, the setting reimagined, the hero reinvented. And so it should be known that your greatest strength is the little steps that you are capable of taking, the little decisions you are capable of making. And remember, safety is not safe when it keeps you from what you need. And the wrong nows have a tendency to evolve into the wrong forevers. The small concessions, well, they become the big mistakes. So if it's a sign you're hoping for, let this be it. If there's a time you're waiting for, let now be that time. If it's someday you are dependent upon, let today be that day. As doing nothing is in fact a decision, but only one of many. One path laid out before you, one single grain of sand, where the edge of today's world touches the shores of tomorrow's. Sometimes it's about the ability to stand up, face the horizon, and just go. Go because it's only upon going that you realize you're capable of the journey. You finally see in yourself the strength you've longed for. It's in going that you realize yesterday's situation wasn't even really the problem. It was your fear of the unknown, of leaving that situation. It was living with the devil you knew, instead of potentially having to face the devil you didn't. That's what happened to your wings. They just felt safer tucked away. But it's in going that we acquire perspective. The tragedies, the devastation, the things that kept us awake at night, they really weren't that bad. But how are we to know? When you build walls around yourself, what's within them becomes your entire world. It's in going that you create yourself. And while everything you need is already beating in your chest, the great unknown before you is the water to that seed, the key to that door. What you fear is exactly what you need. And so the beautiful dance through life goes on. Not beautiful because of its elegance, it's rarely that. But beautiful because of its promise, its malleability. Beautiful because we get to move without answers in order to find answers. Beautiful because what we become is directly proportional to what we're willing to endure. And that means that the universe doesn't judge. It doesn't know us by our failures or our mistakes, but by our courage. Our courage to face all of these things and move forward anyway. To relentlessly explore the resilience of the human spirit. An infinite light in an otherwise finite world, a bridge that is built beneath our feet in real time. And what a weight off of our shoulders to know this. We don't have to get it right. We just have to step out the door trusting that we will pick up enough pieces to put together something meaningful. We just have to go. And then the world, it opens up. Just like that. Leave the old, embrace the new, simple, you think to yourself. Well, yeah, of course, the best things in life are always simple. Always have been, always will be. We just imagine them to be difficult. We have a knack for making simple decisions into complex matrices of cause and effect, pros and cons, wins and losses. We learn to think for years until we finally come to the brilliant realization that happiness, that meaning, that a life well lived comes when we think less. Ready, fire, aim. There is no perfect path, just an adjusted course, an endless series of change, of learning that falling is just a road sign indicating where we need to go next. You can't plan for that. You can't chart a course that doesn't exist. No, you leave who you were yesterday behind and you set sail. They'll ask you, where do you see yourself in 5 years? And you'll think, who knows? But not here. It couldn't be here. It must be somewhere evolved, where pieces of the world shaped your outlook and became the armor that you now wear. New game, new rules, new expectations, new people, new places. And what really changed? Well, how you view yourself. It's funny how it all works. How things come together when we look over our shoulders. Like it was meant to be. As if this had to be the way things are. No, you could very easily have stayed dreaming, looking out that window, wishing you could leave, hoping for answers that didn't exist. And so the complex now feels as simple as we meant it to. We move forward not knowing but trusting, and we look back with the sense of understanding and a confidence that was built over time. In the game of life, there are people who go and people who stay. People who build and people who don't. And I'm not saying everything will be perfect or everything will immediately snap into place. How could I? But what I am saying is that in moving forward, we pull back the curtain on the opportunity that is available to us. We move from the physical limitations of the bodies we walk around in and towards the infinite power of the mind that powers them. We become who we were always meant to be. How do we know what that is? Well, not until we look over our shoulders, of course. So go. Go make your mistakes. Go learn your lessons. Feel your moments of pain and your moments of bliss. Your times of doubt and your times of certainty. Because in doing so, you will have done the very thing so few people get to do with their limited time on this planet. Truly live. So go. Just go. Someday, the things that you currently don't understand will make sense. Someday, the big things you're dealing with won't seem so big anymore. Someday, the doubts you have about yourself will be revealed as false. Someday you'll see that the things you worry about didn't matter at all. Someday you'll see that the road before you wasn't something you had to walk flawlessly, but rather something you had to trust and believe in. Someday you'll look in the mirror and see that you had it in you the entire time, that there was nothing you needed or should have been hoping for. Yeah, someday. Someday that will all be true. But what about some days from the past? I remember years ago thinking someday I would venture out into the world. Someday I'd speak my mind. Someday I would start my own business. I would surround myself with people who believed in what I believe. Someday I'd make a little more money, have a little more time to do what I love. Someday I'd have all that. And as I look around, I realize it looks a lot like someday. But guess what? As we grow, so do our some days. It's a chase that never ends. There's always something more. There's always something bigger and better. And the problem is not the ambition. The problem is forgetting that in so many ways, you've dreamt of being where you stand right now. You have arrived. You're not the same person that 10 years ago was throwing some days out into the universe. No, you have grown. You have learned. You have evolved. Why does this matter? It matters because without acknowledging how far you've come, you cannot acquire the strength needed to go where you must go. When you don't feel good enough, it's often because you haven't looked over your shoulder and opened your eyes. The evidence is right there. It's hiding in plain sight. There's proof that you've been there, that you've faced demons and conquered them, endured your battles and overcame. You did that. And at one point not that long ago, you couldn't say that you had. You weren't yet that person, but things are different now. What you have today was once only that hopeful someday. It was a fleeting thought. It had no merit and no value, yet you brought it to life. Look what you've done. Understand how far you've come, how you ran when you could, you walked when it was possible, you crawled when you had to, and continued on to arrive at a someday that is right now. You, my friend, are a maker of things unseen, an architect of tomorrows and some days, so don't you dare, don't you ever entertain the delusion that this gift suddenly stops now. Suddenly the burden is too much. The mountain is too tall. No, what you do is overcome. That is who you are. You've done it for you. You've done it for the ones you love, and in some cases, the ones who didn't even understand, but you kept going. Marching through the fires of hell to turn some days into right nows. And I get that the road before you is uncertain. There's no way to know exactly how life will unfold. But that's besides the point. A bird can't predict every gust of wind it's going to encounter. It spreads its wings, takes off, and adapts because it can, because it always has, because that's what it does. I'm not advocating that you should have all the answers, No, I'm suggesting that you trust yourself to find them. To move forward into the haze that surrounds you, to make sense of the seemingly illogical, bring about reality from the make-believe. Someday, you will have what you're aiming for. But here's to never letting a today go by without realizing that you are always living out a someday from your past. You are always arriving and leaving simultaneously. The accomplished and the student, crossing a finish line and on the starting block with another race around the corner, another chance to stretch your legs and reach for the heavens. If you ever forget that, I ask that you find it within yourself to look over your shoulder, to remember what you once asked for, and to appreciate the journey that you have undertaken. You did that. Now onward you go. You have more some days to bring to life.